You're listening to the Sass Says podcast. I'm your host, Christie Rocha, also known as Sass. I identify as a woman, a wife, and a mother. That should tell you a lot already. And over the last few years, I've learned the value of talk therapy. I have seen how my inner work not only enhances my own well-being, but also my marriage, my parenting, my relationships. And in fact, you wouldn't be hearing this right now if it weren't for the work I've done. My mission is to debunk the misconceptions and stigmas around what therapy is and who it's for. Let's normalize working on our mental health and seeking help when needed. We've all heard of self-care, self-help, and self-love, but do you often wonder how to actually make it all happen? I do. You'll hear strategy-based conversations with professionals, as well as inspiring and validating stories from women who are just like you and me. Think of this podcast as the weekly therapy sessions you didn't know you needed, with a dash of sass, a lot of vulnerability, and me, relentlessly asking, but how? Hello, welcome to the show. As a reminder, this month's series is focused on motherhood, pregnancy, and mental health. Last week, we heard from Melissa Fairhurst on how we can better prepare moms for the fourth trimester. This week, I'm joined by Danielle Smith. Danielle is a licensed mental health therapist and certified perinatal professional. Her virtual private practice, called Empowered Counseling, is where she provides individual therapy for those struggling with anything pregnancy and postpartum related, including pregnancy loss, fertility struggles, and difficulties through pregnancy and postpartum. Today, we discuss Danielle's journey into the mental health field, her personal experience as a new mom during the COVID-19 pandemic, and the challenges faced by new mothers all around. We discuss the shift in identity that comes with motherhood and the importance of addressing mental health concerns during the perinatal period. Danielle also shares her inspiration for creating a coaching program for first responder wives. And if you like what you hear, make sure you sign up to join us on July 31st for a live Zoom panel discussion featuring Danielle, Melissa, and Kristine, and of course me. Visit sasssays.com/panel to sign up. All right, here's Danielle. Hey, Danielle, so nice to meet you. Thanks for being here with me.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
It's not often I get a fellow Jersey girl on the show, so we're
Yes.
already connected. You know how it is.
Yes, I love that one. Yes, when you said that, I was like, okay, I'm in.
Jersey is like a personality trait. I feel like we all
Yes,
just wear it like a badge of honor. Did you grow up here?
I did. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went away for college for a few years outside of Jersey, but came right back.
Come right back home. I know the feeling.
Yes.
All right, so let's get right into it. Danielle, why did you get into the mental health field? Why become a therapist? What's your
Yeah.
why?
Sure. So why did I come into the mental health field? I knew that I wanted to do something like within the helping profession. But truthfully, like went into college undecided on what my major was going to be. And through like exploring in college, I did land on social work.
Mm.
I just loved the idea of like, there's so many different things that you can do with social work. So I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do yet with social work, but I knew like there were just so many options to help so many different people. So went down that route. I got my master's in social work, did like multiple internships, kind of like tested the waters on some things. And then after grad school, my second job after grad school, I ended up at a partial program.
Mm.
So that is, that's doing like group therapy basically all day with people who suffer from mental illness. And I just loved it. So from there, that's kind of just where I've been since. I did the partial program for a few years, and then I transitioned to being in like a counseling center for a few years, and now doing my own private practice.
Mm-hmm. I often start the show by asking that question, and I often hear a similar start to it of like, I always knew I wanted to be a helper of some kind.
Yeah.
When you look back on your life, is there something that you can attribute that desire to, or is that just innately in you? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I do remember in high school having a conversation, like talking with my mom and, trying to figure it out, right? And I'm like, I feel like I'm always trying to help people. Like, I feel like my friends are like texting me for
Mhm.
advice, or like I just always want to like be there for people. So nothing real specific. I will say how I landed in my specialty now within my
Okay.
private practice, like that's a little bit more, there's more of a story behind that. Um, but just to help people, I think that was just like within me.
Mhm. Mhm. So, what is this story of where you specialize now and why?
Sure, sure. So I specialize in perinatal mental health.
Mm.
So I see people, primarily women, um, all along like pregnancy and postpartum journey. So that could be someone struggling with fertility issues or pregnancy loss or mental health struggles through like pregnancy and postpartum.
Mhm.
Um, and for me, I became a mom in 2020.
Mm.
So that was, a
Mhm.
rough year for everyone. And so I was
First time mom
pregnant
in 2020?
first. Yes, yes. I
Yeah.
had my son in August of 2020.
Mm.
Um, and I just wasn't prepared. Like I knew I
Mhm.
wanted to be a mom and like it all seemed like really exciting.
Mhm.
And I actually like loved pregnancy. But the postpartum really impacted me. That like fourth trimester, I just didn't know what to expect. And it was really difficult. So I felt like after I came out of that fog, that's where I decided, like, okay, like I know where I want my focus to be. Um, I've been a therapist for a while, and I felt like that was like the first like aha moment. Like this is really like
Mm.
who I want to serve from here on out. So then I got my certification and like shifted like my practice to really like serve that population.
Mhm. So, first time mom in 2020, and you have another kid now too?
Yeah, yeah, I have a daughter too. She's almost one. She
Oh
was
my
born
goodness.
June of last year.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, my son was born in 2020, but he was my second. So,
Oh, okay.
I feel like that, it was all insanity, but just for different
Yeah.
reasons, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, super, super challenging, I think, I mean, obviously, for everyone, but particularly for
Yeah.
moms. I mean, I even think about, you know, I had him February, at the end of February, and
Mm,
so it was right
wow.
before, and I
Yeah.
remember, my niece and nephew couldn't come see us in the hospital. They were
Mm, yeah.
limiting visitors at that time to, I think it was 16 or 18 and older. And we were all kind of like, why? Like, what is this about? What's
Yeah.
going on? And then like
Yeah.
2 weeks later, it's like paranoia and
This is
like the
it.
whole thing, everybody's like losing their minds. Um,
Yeah.
but I often think about how, like I didn't have to deliver with a mask. I didn't have to deliver
Right.
without my people around, like, I mean, that is like a
Yeah.
next level challenge.
Yeah.
How did you personally cope in that 4th trimester and beyond? I mean, I think most of us want to believe that as a therapist, you might have a leg up, but I often
Right.
hear that when
Right.
it's yourself, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yes. Well, I'll touch even on like the pregnancy. Like I said, I did enjoy pregnancy, but with like you mentioned like the mask and the support person, like there were talks while I was pregnant about my husband not being allowed to be in the delivery room. And I think
Oh my
that's when
god. Oh.
I think I had my first panic attack after that conversation
Oh,
with
yeah.
my OB. I called him like, I just couldn't believe it. I'm like, this is just not how it's
Yeah.
supposed to be. I like can't do
Yeah.
this without you there. That didn't happen. So he was there. Um, but I think like I mean, that was a huge shock, just that after that appointment, like, oh my goodness, like this is real. This
Mhm.
is changing everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, that fourth trimester, I mean, it was August. There was a little bit of a relief at that point. I feel like COVID was like, people were kind of venturing out a little. So we did have like some visitors, thankfully, because I don't know how I would have done without that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for me, it was tough. I mean, my husband is a police officer that plays a role in this as well. So, you know, he went back to work and he was working nights, and I just remember being alone like at night with my son, and he cried a lot.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so like he's crying, I'm calling my husband, like I don't know what to do, and he's like, I don't know what to do either, I'm at work. So that was really hard.
Yeah.
And I can remember I was nursing, so I was, you know, up in the night and
Mm-hmm.
nursing him, but like having these, you know, racing thoughts about all these other things. And then I had a lot of really great support, but there's some surprises as well. I think that big milestones really kind of show you like who's going to like show up and who's going to be there for you. So there was some like disappointments that happened.
Yeah.
Just people that you expect to be there who maybe like didn't show up in the way that you were expecting. So I know that was tough as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was
Yeah.
a few
It's hard.
things there.
Yeah, you shared in the prep questions with me, and I don't necessarily know if you meant it for yourself, and I'm sure there's a part of it that's included with your own experience, but I think just in general, kind of pulling the scope back out a little bit, you know, you said motherhood is very revealing and forces you to look at parts of yourself you may have been suppressing or ignoring. And
Yeah.
if we just take that first part, motherhood is very revealing. I pulled it out because, yes, I agree as far as what we have to look at in ourselves, but just touching on what we've been talking about so far, it's so revealing of your environment as well. Like it's everything.
Yeah.
It is everything.
Yeah.
Like nothing rocks your world inside and out like bringing
Yeah.
another human into it. Like it's
Right.
wild.
Yeah. It
Can you
is.
like can you expand on that a little bit more and what you mean by that? And you can take it off of yourself, you can bring it back out, but
Right.
just what you mean by, I guess, motherhood is revealing and a little bit more on that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I talk about this so much with my clients, you know, with my new moms coming in, and they're like, wait, I never struggled with this before. Like, what's going on? Or like these really, like, this certain thing in my life never bothered me until I became a mom. And I explained that to them. Like, it just kind of like opens you up and
Yeah.
forces you to see just like certain parts of yourself or maybe of other people that you were either suppressing or, you know, it's kind of at the surface, but, you know, it wasn't really bothering you. Even I think like certain like coping strategies maybe that you were using before that
Oh yeah.
just
Out the window.
out the window, either like maybe they weren't like the healthiest,
Oh, true,
right?
true,
Like,
true. Yeah.
you know, you can't just go out and like go to the
Rage.
bar, party.
Yeah.
Yeah. But also the healthier ones. You can't just get up and like go get your nails done, or like, I know that along with what we're the topic we're talking about, like grief is a big part of motherhood too. I think I see a lot. And I think I've like identified through like my own therapy with myself. I think there was a lot of like grieving my past life. Um of just being able to do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. And
Yeah.
I only just like recognized that piece of it. And I think that was like really powerful for me to be able to like name that and be like, oh, okay, that's what's been going on over the last like 2.5 years. Like, it's not that I'm a bad mom, it's that I was grieving
Yeah.
like this whole life that I had before becoming a mom.
Yeah. I think, my oldest is 5.5.
Mhm.
I think I'm still grieving. And
Right. Sure.
I think partly because when you have another, it just like it starts all over again,
Right. Yeah.
because there's certain things that when the older one gets older that you start to be able to do again, and then you start over again.
Yeah.
Um, and then you throw in a global pandemic and you're just like,
Right.
what is life? Like I did not sign
Right.
up for this.
Yeah.
I was already
Yeah.
shocked by what life is with kids, and now you're
Hmm.
throwing in a situation that I have no control over, and that is like scary
Yeah.
on top of
That's
it.
so scary. Yeah.
Um, so I think grief is a really good one to highlight as far as something that often comes as a shock, I think, to new moms. Are there
Hmm.
other things that you consistently see that are either, very surprising or challenging in that new
Hmm.
motherhood phase that people might not know or might not think about?
Yeah. Yeah. I think a few things. The few that come to mind, we kind of touched on this, but like the shift of identity, I think
Yeah.
that like goes along with grief too. It's like
Hmm.
your whole everything like shifts, your whole identity shifts, and the things that, were once important maybe aren't as important, or you can't do them anymore. Um, I think too, something that's really surprising to new moms is connection with their baby. You
Hmm.
see it in movies or TV shows, like just like this instant connection, or social media, where it's
Yeah.
like you just have this image of a mom and her baby and this instant bond.
Yeah.
And it's, more common than people realize that it doesn't quite work like that.
Hmm.
Um, and I know, like, even for me, like that, like mother's intuition that people talk about, like I just assumed, like, oh, I become a mom and like I'm gonna know.
Hmm.
And that was something I struggled with. Like my son would cry a lot, and I'm like, I'm supposed to know
Hmm.
what he's crying, like what he needs. Like that's what they say. Like you're just gonna know. You're just gonna know.
Hmm.
Um, I can remember like being on the phone with my husband crying, being like, I'm his mom. I'm supposed to know what he needs.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that was a shock for me, and definitely a shock for other people too, that it might not like
Hmm.
look like
Yeah.
it does.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
I think, the intuition thing, that's a good one to bring up because on one hand, if we look at society, we look at social media, we look at movies, you're 100% right. We hear all the time, you're just going to know that motherhood, that mother, you know, whatever it is will
Yeah.
kick in, right? But at the same time, we're constantly fed, here's how you should do it.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so when you're getting these often conflicting messages of what is my gut telling me versus
Yeah.
like what this quote unquote parenting expert on social media says it should be like or that I should
Yeah.
do, I guess what I'm envisioning is like there's just so much noise out there that it is
Yeah.
hard to not only be able to hear your own gut intuition, but then have
Mhm.
enough confidence and courage when you're sleep deprived
Mhm.
and in this new role to listen to it.
So true. Yeah.
What
So
advice
true.
would you give a new mom right now that's like hearing this or a pregnant mom and going like,
Yeah.
okay, like they're telling me like what is out there, but like what do I do about it? Like how do I start to trust my
Right.
gut and
Right.
really get in tune with myself?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I do talk about this a lot with clients. There's someone, I think her name is Dr. Sterling. You might follow her on Instagram, but
I'm sure I
she
do.
has
I
talked
follow them all.
about something. She's talked about something called the millennial parent problem. And I heard her talk about it on a
I'm already
podcast. And I'm
laughing.
like, it's so true, because there's so much information, so
Yeah.
many like, mommy bloggers and sleep, like there's just so much out there that
Hmm.
it's so hard to build your confidence, because it's like you just Google it, or you just go to a certain Instagram page, and then you're right. It's like, okay, but my like intuition is telling me this, but this person on social media is saying, like, you can't do that.
Yeah.
So it does get really confusing. So first I start with like, I'll say exactly that, like about like normalize this. Like this is not like
Mm.
you're not alone. This is
Mhm.
something like we've all struggled with.
Mhm.
So normalize it and a little like education there. And then I try to encourage grace and some sort of like pause. I think there's so much like power in the pause too, rather than impulsively like hop to the phone, like take
Yeah.
a deep breath and like really try to like listen
Mhm.
to what your gut is telling you, right? And go with it. As obviously as long as you know you're not putting your baby in harm's way,
Right.
right? It's okay to go with it. And even if it doesn't work,
Mhm.
then you figure something else out, right? So I always try to encourage like first try to do what your gut says to build
Yeah.
up that confidence, right? Rather than hopping to
Yeah.
a different source.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just all I can think about as you're talking is like for decades and hundreds of years and like every
Yeah.
people raise babies without Instagram.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
but somehow they did it. They even did it without
Right.
phones to be able to call their moms to figure it
Right.
out. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, that's just like such a silly, obvious thing to say, but
Yeah.
I think sometimes we forget that. And I think that does sound like
Yeah.
a very millennial problem because we're so accustomed most of our life, certainly our entire adult life has been with this computer in our hands. Um,
Yes.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's so
It's
true.
hard. It's hard to separate. It's hard to separate, especially like when I'm thinking about like you said, like being on the phone with your husband crying and I'm supposed to know. It's like
Yeah.
that's such a desperate state that I know so well and can like feel in my bones when I just hear you talk about
Mhm.
it that you want to be able to just pick up the phone and have an answer. And
Yeah.
honestly, I mean, this is such a simplified thing to say, but sometimes it's just that babies cry.
Right.
Like you don't
Right.
there's not necessarily an answer, right? Like they're supposed to cry,
Mhm.
Like
Right.
I don't know, there's so
Yeah.
many things like that that we just you're not gonna find it on an Instagram feed,
Yeah.
you know? Um,
Exactly.
okay.
Exactly.
All right. So as far as some of the more diagnosable, postpartum mood disorders and things like this,
Mhm.
are there any risk factors that can contribute to, I don't know, developing one of these? Trying to choose my
Yeah.
words carefully there.
Right.
Like, how do I say
Yes.
that?
Yes. I mean, definitely. I mean, if you have a prior history of mental health struggles, then you definitely want to be more mindful of that
Hmm.
and more like vigilant with checking in with yourself because you're more likely to develop it's called a PMAD, which is perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. So that encompasses like postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, um, postpartum like bipolar disorder, and psychosis
Hmm.
and OCD. So yeah, if there's a family history or if you have a history of mental health struggles, um, other things could be like if you a lack of support,
Hmm.
sleep deprivation, which is like such a hard one
Yeah.
because what new mom is not sleep deprived?
Right.
Um, so that's something I with all my pregnant clients, we talk about and we try to like come up with like a plan as much as you can with when are you going to sleep, even
Hmm.
if it's, during the day while someone takes the baby. Um, yeah, so those are
Okay.
a few. Yeah.
I'm curious. Um, are your like so I started therapy when I was pregnant with my second, but I didn't specifically seek out a therapist that specializes in
Mm,
maternal mental health. And
yeah.
at this point, I'm still with her and
Yeah.
it worked out. But
Right.
I'm curious, that's curious to me because I'm
Mhm.
always I'm always thinking about how, and it was something I would ask you, like, how do we better prepare moms? What
Mhm.
do we do to, like, chip away at this sort of thing that we're always doing, at least in the US, where it's a problem and then we try to fix it. Like,
Yeah.
we don't what I'm not finding the right words, but I think you know what I'm saying. Like, we don't come
Yeah.
at things from a preventative way.
Prevent, yeah, we wanna prevent. Yeah.
And I'm curious, like, I guess what I'm wondering, without being too specific, obviously, like, what is it about someone who's pregnant that goes, "Hey, I'm gonna seek out a maternal mental health therapist and do this,"
Right.
because so many don't. Like,
Right.
what is it about that
Yeah.
person that makes them do it? Because I want to just, like, take that and bottle
Yeah.
it and give it to everyone who's pregnant.
Yes. I know, and that's the thing, like, most of the time I do get that, like, get the, women, like, when they have had the baby, and then
Yeah,
they'll through therapy, they're like, "Oh, no," like, I've been anxious, like, the whole pregnancy, but
yeah.
I thought once the baby came, I
Mm,
would feel better."
mhm.
But then they don't, and then that's when they reach out. So, yeah, whenever I get a pregnant person calling, I am just like, "Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
this is so great. Like, this is the time." Even when you're thinking about getting pregnant,
Yes,
like, that's
totally.
really the time. But I think
Yeah.
there's a lack of awareness that
Mm,
we even exist. Um, Sometimes what happens is maybe they'll express to their OB that their feelings, and then they might give them, like, my information.
mhm.
But those appointments are so short and they're not always
Yeah,
asking those questions. Um, so it's a tough question. I think it's when they're feeling something already.
yeah.
It's I find that it's not so much like, I just wanna prepare for when the baby comes.
Mm,
It's more like, okay, I've already been feeling anxious, or I'm already feeling really nervous about the 4th trimester,
mhm,
or maybe I do have a history, like I had postpartum depression with my first pregnancy, so I want to get ahead of it this time.
mhm.
That's most of the calls that I get. Like, they're
Yeah,
already feeling like a little something.
yeah. I don't know. Like, I there's so many variations of this feeling, and it goes from, at birth, we get a pediatrician, we should get a counselor. Or,
Right.
like, at
Yes.
least you know,
Yeah.
at least when a woman gives birth or just
Yeah.
gets pregnant, you get an OB, you also get a counselor. And then it's like,
Right.
okay, let's bring it even more possible. You have a office of OBs, put a counselor in the office.
Yeah.
Have a
Yeah.
mandatory visit. I don't
Mhm.
understand this.
Yeah.
It's like,
That would be wonderful.
I just don't get it. It
Yeah.
starts to feel like, and this is gonna maybe I don't wanna go down this road. It starts to feel like this is exactly what the patriarchy wants. Like, it starts to
Mm.
feel like,
Mhm.
let's just keep not giving women and moms resources because we want them to stay
Right.
right where they are. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's not a rabbit hole I wanna go down, but it just does. It just starts to feel like,
Yeah.
what? Like, what? What?
Right.
Why
Right.
not? I don't know.
Yeah. No, yeah, there should
Get
be more
crazy
screening.
about
I
it.
don't Yeah, I know for me, like, during pregnancy, I don't think I got asked at all about my mental
No,
health,
no
but
way.
I know, like, my children's, like, their pediatrician, they're the ones
Yeah,
who, like, they had me do a screening and talk to me more about mental health
yeah,
than my OB really did.
yeah. I I I the same experience, and with my
Yeah.
first, I remember being, a little too nervous to answer honestly,
Mhm.
and also it's so hard, like,
Yeah.
at least my experience with the screening was, like, let's call it 10 questions on a scale of 1 to
Yeah.
10,
Yeah.
and you are in your head, in the waiting room trying to figure out, "Do I need to answer this and say I'm at an 8, or am I just tired?"
Yeah.
Like,
Right?
you don't
Yeah.
know. Like,
Yeah.
what do you look for, or what are some of the questions you ask, or what are some of the ways that you help your clients, like, decipher that very thing? Is this something more, or
Yeah.
is this just I'm sleep deprived and my whole world has been rocked, but I'm okay? What are some of the
Yeah.
differentiating factors there?
Right. That's a good question because like there's the baby blues,
Right.
right? And then there's the PMAD.
Right.
So the baby blues, like 80% of new moms will experience the baby blues,
Mm,
right? Like that's like crying. It's a lot of like the hormone shifts can cause a big emotional response.
mhm,
But it depends on the severity and how long that lasts. So the baby blues can be like it can be like up to 2 weeks. And then if it lasts beyond that, then we have
mhm.
to start to look at that even more. Like what's going on. I've seen people come in like right after the baby and they are like, tears are flowing. I don't even know what's going I don't feel like myself. But then I'll see them like the next week and it's like a whole new person.
Mhm.
So that would be okay, that was the baby blues and now you're feeling more like yourself. So it's really like the severity of the symptoms and how long they last.
Okay. And when you listed out earlier some of the specifics of within the PMAD category,
Mhm.
you mentioned OCD and you mentioned bipolar. Are these things that can be triggered by pregnancy and delivery?
Right. So, well,
I hear often about anxiety and
yeah.
depression, even a
Yeah.
little bit OCD, to be honest, but
Yeah.
bipolar not so much. And I think even OCD is like kind of like not talked about hardly at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, I mean, to touch on OCD, a lot of times there was something prior to,
Okay.
right? And then event can bring about those symptoms. And
Okay.
then we'll be exploring it. And I'm like, oh, have you ever felt like that in the past? Like, oh yeah, I did this or
Right.
that. Maybe that was a little quirky, but it never bothered me before. But
Hmm.
now like a traumatic event or, big life change can really exacerbate
Yeah.
those symptoms. Um, you mentioned something which I wanted to touch on too, like being afraid to even answer some of those
Hmm.
questions because of, then this relates to OCD because like there can be like these intrusive thoughts
Hmm.
and they pop in and we're afraid to say them because what's going to happen, there's a stigma around that. um and with OCD it's you're having these intrusive thoughts and they are repetitive and
Hmm.
then you're trying to do something to make them go away. So maybe like I have a obsessive thought like I'm going to drop the baby, so I'm not going to carry the baby, someone else is going to do that.
Hmm.
So to answer your question, like pregnancy can really exacerbate those symptoms.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I don't know if you know of her, but Jenna Overbaugh, she
Mm.
has a whole she is like on a mission, that girl. She got you
Yeah.
gotta check her out
Oh, yeah, I
about
do, yeah.
postpartum OCD. She's
Really?
incredible. She's just yeah, she does a
Oh,
lot
yeah, I
of
have to
great
check her
work.
out.
Yeah, she's very good with that. Has a ton of resources and just has dedicated her like life's work to it. It's very
Mm,
she's very
yeah,
she's good. All
yeah,
right. So okay. All right. So this kind of touches on as far as being nervous to answer questions and things like that. There is still a lot of stigma around mental health in general,
yeah.
maternal mental health. How do you address some of these stigmas? Are there any misconceptions that you would love to just like plaster on a billboard and clear them up?
Right,
Like, what are some of the
right.
ways you address the stigmas that are still out there about
Yeah.
all of what we've been talking about?
Yeah, I mean, there is so many stigmas. I mean, I try to raise awareness.
Yeah.
I have my Instagram account that I'm always trying to like spread awareness and trying to like normalize, I think, intrusive thoughts, especially because they
Mhm,
can be so scary and so unwanted.
mhm,
Um, so I try to like educate people too. I think the big thing I would want to plaster is like thoughts do not equal action.
mm,
So if someone comes to you and says, I have this thought, yeah, like I want to do something maybe harmful, but that person is so scared of that thought, like they're not, that doesn't mean they're going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like there's so much fear around that, like more psychosis, where, I have this thought and like, yeah, like it's not scary at all. And, maybe that person will act on it.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing I would, want to plaster would be like, thoughts don't equal action. If someone comes to you saying these things, that doesn't mean that they just need to be like put away.
Yeah.
Because there's so much stigma around that.
Yeah. No, that's a good one. Yeah. I will notice this. What advice or recommendations, or like, what do you want to say to the supporting partners of, pregnant women, moms? What
Yeah.
do you want to say to them? What should they be looking out for? What's
Yeah.
their role in all of this?
Sure. Well, definitely want to say to them to be mindful, right? To be looking out for those symptoms, for, excessive crying. Really what I would want to say is like, they're not going to come to you and say like, I have depression, or I
Right.
think I have
They might not even
postpartum
know.
anxiety.
Yeah.
Right. They might not know, but just to look out and just to check in. Right. I think that there's just this like, oh, she's just like tired, or oh, she's just emotional. Like, no, like really ask like, how are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
But another thing is like, check in with yourself too, because partners can develop postpartum depression or like PMEDs as well. A big factor would be like if the new mom develops a PMED, like there's more of a risk for their partner too as well.
Mm-hmm.
I know Dr. Cassidy, who I know you interviewed, like
Yeah.
she talks about this a lot.
Yeah.
With her own experience. So that's a great resource. But yeah, that's another thing I'd share too, is like, it can affect you as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't even, it's hard to put myself back in that place of being really a new mom, or even just newly postpartum.
Mm-hmm.
You can't even speak half the time. Like
Yeah. Right.
you're not gonna have,
Yeah.
not always. I shouldn't say that. You shouldn't, anyway. I don't know. I'm just,
Mhm. You're not gonna have
oh
maybe the words to even
yeah.
verbalize.
I don't even often have the words now.
Yeah.
I
Right.
have them when I'm not in it.
Yeah.
But in
Sure.
it, it's like, nope,
Yeah.
can't, no, mm-mm.
Right.
I appreciate you
Yeah.
asking questions, but no.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm being, I think I'm fumbling my words here a little bit, mostly because I do this a lot when I'm on the show, but it's like, it literally, like, it puts me right back there, and it's like kind of like
Yeah.
reprocessing. But also an anxiety attack last night that I've
Mm,
only had one other to this level in my
really.
life, and it kind of like, it really seemingly came out of nowhere, and I think that
Uh-huh.
shocked me even more.
Yeah.
And my husband was not home. He was working really late last night, and I
Mm,
called him because I had the sensation of just having so much noise in my head that I felt
mhm.
like if I don't speak to another human being and just like get it,
Yeah.
it felt like I needed to speak and get it out. But
Yeah.
then it was so funny. I got on the phone, and, he, with the best of intentions, was like, "What can I do? I'm on my way. Like, how
Yeah,
can I
yeah, yeah.
help you?" Blah, blah, blah. And I was like,
Yeah.
I can't answer these questions right now. I
Right.
just need you to know that there is a song playing in my head on repeat,
Yeah.
going round and round, and it's driving me to the point of like
Yeah.
wanting to throw up. Like, I cannot, like, and it's like,
Mhm.
and it's hard. And
Yeah.
I say that because it's so, you don't know how things are going to affect you, and you don't know what you're going to
Right.
want and you're going to need. It's a reminder for me that I've been thinking about for a while, that I need some kind of like code word for those
Yeah.
moments to just
Yeah.
say, Apple, And it's like, here's what I need you to
Yeah.
do when I say apple. You know
Hmm.
what I mean?
That's a good
Because
idea. Yeah.
I can't, I'm just trying to like live right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I
Oh,
know that is such a good idea.
yeah.
Code word. And you don't know
Yeah.
when it's gonna hit. Like you said, you didn't know
Right.
that was gonna happen last night. And
Yeah.
with postpartum too, like a lot of times people think it's gonna happen right away. You know, PMADs are gonna happen right away, but they can develop later on
Yeah.
too, postpartum. I know with my daughter, I thought I was like through the woods, and then it
Yeah.
was more like three months postpartum,
Yeah.
where that's when I really started feeling it. Like I had a lot of changes at that point, going back to work and stuff, and like that's really when I felt it at
Yeah.
that point. So I think that's another like misconception
Yeah.
as well. So
Yeah.
to keep
Yeah.
checking in with your partner. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, certainly the comment for me with my second, the combination of the lockdown, but like at my worst was about 8 months postpartum,
Oh,
you
okay.
know?
Okay. Yeah.
Um, and I don't even know if that would still qualify as
Hmm.
postpartum, but it was like just
Yeah. Yeah.
combination
Hmm.
of lockdown, I think too. But anyway,
Yeah.
um, okay. So you mentioned it earlier. It was also something you shared with me offline. Your husband is a police officer.
Yes.
And you developed a coaching program called Beyond the Badge, empowering first responder wives to achieve balance and joy through motherhood.
Hmm.
What inspired this? I can only imagine.
Yeah.
And can you talk about some of the specific challenges that, you know, law enforcement, spouses, mothers
Yeah.
face and how you're addressing them?
Sure, sure. So this is more like a new venture
Okay.
that I'm on. I mean, so I've worked with many police officer or like first responder spouses over my years of being a therapist. And I noticed in the last few years of really specializing in working with the perinatal population, like I've had a few first responder wives come to me, and I do most of the time, if appropriate, like disclose that
Mm-hmm.
I fall in that same boat, and they're just like find a lot of comfort in that,
Mm-hmm.
to be with someone who like understands the unique challenges. So I've just been thinking a lot, like for a while, of like I really wanted to support that population specifically. So I've been like kind of exploring different options, and I landed on doing a coaching program, which is going to be very cool. I'm launching it now, basically. Um,
Did
and
I out
it's
you? I'm sorry.
no, this is great. No,
Okay.
I definitely wanted to talk about
Okay.
it.
Okay.
Because I'm in the process of really creating it. So what it's
Okay.
gonna look like is I have a Facebook group for
Okay.
um moms who are married to first responders, and that's going to be like just a group to be together to chat about things. And if anyone wants to work with me, then I'm creating a course, and it's going to be like a few months long. There's like 8 modules within there, and it's along with doing like group coaching and one-on-one coaching. So really it's going to be helping those women navigate motherhood while also being married to a first responder. So even something I already talked about, like the unique like work schedule,
Yeah.
that's a challenge, or the shifting of the schedule, like so many times a week
Your
it's like,
face.
oh, you're gonna be home tonight. No, actually, like I have to, like I got
Mm,
called in for this, or I get called in for that. So balancing all that, the mental load
mhm.
of the household, along with, being a mom and also being a wife of someone with a pretty unpredictable
Mm,
schedule. Um, and really the goal is to help like empower and give these moms more confidence and really more like self-care. I know that's something that is hard. I'm definitely still working on it. It's like
mhm.
finding that time for myself to like take off the many like hats that I wear, to take off
Okay.
the motherhood hat, to take off the wife hat, even to take off like the wife of a police officer
Yeah.
hat, right? And just like be with myself,
Hmm.
and take care of myself and take off, the work hat too. Um, so that's the goal. I want to just help that population just find like more joy and
Yeah.
more like self-care within
Yeah.
this like role.
Yeah. And forgive me if this is like so like such a childish, ignorant question, but often what I've seen portrayed just in media over the years,
Mhm.
the total like no, as officers we do not need to see the counselor. We do not need to
Oh,
like this kind of trope on media where it's like always on a SVU there's a
mhm.
something that happens and they want the cop to go see the therapist or the entire
Yeah,
movie Departed, like, and they resist it so much. Like, is this a
yeah,
real thing still in 2023 that there's like this resistance? Because I could see even
right.
if that is a thing, is there resistance for their partner getting this sort of support? Like, I don't know. This is
Mm,
like a grossly generalized question I'm asking
right.
you, but I'm just curious what you see,
Yeah.
like just kind of taking your temperature on it, I guess.
Sure. No, I mean, and I don't know if I have the exact answer to that. I think it's definitely gotten better. I
Okay.
don't think, like, I do know there are programs that have been created for cops. Like, there's
Okay.
cops for cop or cops to cops, I think it's called, where like cops will actually like help support a police officer who it might be struggling.
Okay.
So I do think as like the stigma, like as we release this stigma around mental health, that
Mm,
even the law enforcement officers are more willing. I haven't noticed like them maybe telling their spouse, like, no, you can't
okay.
do counseling, right? Like
That's
that's not
good. Yeah.
something, but I'm also seeing the person who's coming for
Right.
counseling. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like,
Right. Right. But they're not
so
sitting down and going necessarily, part of what's really hard is that my husband hates that I'm doing this or my partner hates that I'm doing
oh,
this.
no.
Right.
I
Okay.
don't see that. And even
Okay.
in my own personal, my husband's extremely supportive
Yeah.
of, I mean, my career,
Right.
also me being in therapy and any sort of like mental health that, I need, and he would be willing to
Yeah.
do it for himself as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but
One
I know
more one
I
more stereotype we need to like do away
right,
with, right? Like,
right.
I mean, and
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying, right? Like I'm not like talking out of
Yeah,
my
for
butt
sure.
here. Like this is like
No, for
a
sure.
thing that we see, right? But it's
Yes.
like,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
They always want to like cast aside the mental health professional and be like, "Oh, I don't need this." Blah, 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 blah."
Right. Yes. Oh, yes. I think it's getting better, but it's
Okay.
definitely, I'm sure it's still there.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
certainly I think we can already see millennials are starting to do it, but
Mhm.
I'm sorry, any Gen Z person
Mhm.
who, like, comes into any sort of law enforcement or first responder is, like, not I don't see Gen Z putting up with any of those roadblocks,
Right.
like, they're gonna just
Right.
barrel through them, right?
Yeah.
Um, okay. So, this is a lot on your plate now. You have 2 little kids, you have
Yeah.
private practice, your
Yeah.
husband's schedule is bananas, on
Yeah.
top of the fact that I'm sure when he is working, it's not necessarily always just like, "Oh, have fun at the office." It's like, no, he's actually out there doing things, so there's some anxiety there, like,
Mhm.
what are some of the ways that you like, I don't know, how do you balance all of this? How do you
Mhm.
cope? How do you take care of yourself?
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a work in progress, but I've been learning like what works for me. I mean, I definitely need to give credit to my support system. I do have like, they say it takes a village,
Mhm,
and I have wonderful like people who will help me out with the kids
mhm,
when I need it. Um but like that's the hardest thing. It is finding that time. Like I'll try to do stuff with the kids that we really enjoy, like being outside and going to the park and just like getting fresh air with them.
Mm-hmm.
But then also trying to remove like guilt if I need to put on Miss Rachel or a TV show and be like, here, you guys, like, mommy needs a
Yeah.
few minutes to like decompress. Like, you know, maybe they're not going to understand what I'm saying, but they'll be
They
happy
will.
to sit there and
Yeah.
like, yeah, they'll, and that I think was hard for a while. Like I would feel really guilty about like the screen time. But I've learned to be okay with that because I know that I need that time to decompress.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then like the nights where my husband is home, like we make it a point, like he will do, you know, his role, of course, and put them to bed and then so that I can get some time to myself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then when I put them to bed, like I love to just like relax, watch Netflix.
Yeah.
My husband's home, we'll hang out. Um, I love to like go get my nails done. Like, but that's again like where the village comes in. Like I have those people who are willing to hang out with the kids so that I can, you know, do some things for myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just have to say, and I appreciate you sharing, how it's still a challenge because
Mm-hmm.
I I can remember listening to conversations like this and going, that sounds great. I'm
Yeah.
still not making that happen, because
Right.
I think
Right.
even a hard first step is having that conversation with your partner, right?
Mm,
Like,
yeah.
yes, like we are marrying men now and having partners that are doing more than their generation before, but it's not equal. It's not,
Right.
and so
Right.
it's like having
Yeah.
those conversations and knowing that you might need to have them again and again and again.
Right.
Like the
Yeah.
reminders of what
For
you need
sure.
and feeling like
Yeah.
you're worth asking for what you need, right? Like,
Yeah. Definitely.
yeah.
Yes.
And going back to
Communication.
where we kind of started this of not having the guilt of like, I remember for me, it was like, well, why can't I just do everything all the time? Like I
Yeah.
felt like guilty about that. And it's like, dude, why?
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
you know?
Yeah. I can
Yeah.
relate to that so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And the last thing that I often talk about on the show, and I just want to ask your opinion on it.
Hmm.
A part of what we talked about earlier about how do we, get reach moms earlier, women earlier is this
Yeah.
awareness. You mentioned that part of your way of doing that is being on social media. Um,
Hmm.
we've talked a little bit about the downsides of social media. There
Yeah.
is also a lot of good
Yeah.
that comes from it, but I know enough from talking to enough therapists now that there is often this it's like a very intentional choice, and I'm curious for you, what is it like for you to be a therapist on social media? What are the
Hmm.
boundaries that you've set up for yourself? What,
Hmm.
like, how walk me through the decision making
Yeah.
process of doing it, and now that you've been doing it a little while, like how you maintain that
Yeah.
relationship.
Sure. That is something that I definitely am navigating.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I do like ultimately really enjoy it. So that's what like keeps me going. But I will say I try to like listen to myself because when I first started and was doing all this research, it's like you have to post every day, you have to do this, you have to do reels and do,
Yeah.
and I really put a lot of pressure on myself to do all of that. And then I would burn out. So I know you just named before, like I have a lot on my plate.
Yeah.
So, and like social media is a whole other job.
Yeah.
So I
It's a beast.
know like in this season, while I'm creating this program, you know, for law enforcement like wives, that social media, like my Instagram account, like I'm not going to post every single day. So I
Yeah.
think that's like a big piece of like trying to like listen to myself and like what I need and trying to like remove that pressure or that guilt.
Hmm.
Um so that's like I said, I kind of like navigating it, taking it day by day.
Hmm.
Um I know who I want to reach. So like that
Okay.
keeps me going, like spreading that awareness and really normalizing things for people.
Yeah.
Um, so that's really like what keeps me going with it.
Yeah. And then as far as the ethics of
Mm,
being public,
mhm.
I know that this is also changing, right? Whereas before, kind of old rule of thumb was do not self-disclose anything, do not put yourself
Yeah,
out there, do not this, like
yeah,
where do you sit with that? I mean, there's some obvious
yeah,
answers to that, but I'm curious a little bit more of your thought process on what you choose to put out there, how
right.
and how like how do you determine what's comfortable? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, no, good question. I mean, I think like it's so important to show that therapists are human. Like
mm,
that is also a goal of mine.
hmm
Like the old way was like blank slate, but who can really relate to that? Like you want to be able to relate on some level with your
yeah,
therapist and see that they're a true human being who, doesn't have it all together all the time. Um, so I do like to portray some of that. I mean, I do have some boundaries. Like I'm not on my phone all the time while I'm at the park with my kids. Like, that's a boundary. Like I want to be present with them.
hmm
And even like on my therapy Instagram account, I'm not really like posting pictures of them. Like I'm trying to navigate what I'm comfortable with, within my coaching program because I am going to have a separate social media account for that.
okay,
So like that I'm still trying to figure out. I think there is going to be a little bit more of like personal
yeah,
life within that platform.
yeah,
But that I'm still trying to figure out. But yeah, just showing that we're human.
yeah, yeah. I hear that all the time. Like
Yeah.
whether it's a therapist or just a mom who's a creator, like
Yeah.
there's a person behind this
Right.
screen.
Yeah.
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 All right. Well, Danielle, is there any, message to moms or women that you want to make sure to say today? Anything that I didn't think to
Mhm.
ask you? Anything you want to leave people
Sure.
with?
Yeah.
Any last words?
Yeah. I mean, really what comes to mind is like the cliche, like it does get better. Like that's
Yeah.
really what like and
Yeah.
like it's okay to like express that this is hard.
hmm
Right? Like that doesn't make you a bad mom, doesn't mean that you don't, care immensely for your child, but it's okay if you say this is hard. It's okay if you're not feeling that instant attachment or intuition. With help, with support, like it truly can get better and you really can like actually enjoy this stage of life.
hmm Boom. Okay.
Yes, that's
Well,
it.
Danielle, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so I said this last week after my conversation with Melissa, and I'm just going to say it again because it is still relevant. This is such an important conversation, and it is the type of conversation that needs to be had over and over and over again. I don't care how many times I have it, you have it, we have it. It doesn't matter. At any point in our motherhood journeys, we need these reminders, we need these check ins. And you know what? There are new women out there every day getting pregnant and birthing babies that who knows when they're going to stumble on this conversation, Melissa's conversation. We just need to keep having conversations that support moms, especially in that fourth trimester, postpartum period. So thank you, Danielle. And if you have more questions for Danielle and want to know more about her or her coaching programs or expertise, make sure you sign up to join us live on July 31st. It's a live Zoom panel discussion. You'll get to ask your questions, or if you prefer to submit your questions anonymously ahead of time, you're welcome to do that at sign up. Visit sasssays.com/panel. And as always, check back in on Friday for my reflections on this conversation. Bye. Thank you so so much for tuning in today. Sass Says is a production of Luann Nigara Inc. This podcast is meant to be educational and not meant to replace professional therapy or professional medical attention. To learn more about today's show and what's new in my world, head over to sasssays.com. Thanks so much. Talk later.